The Department of Justice has had multiple news conferences just this morning, starting to show the public the extent of the fraud that they've uncovered. Additionally, the very first prosecution and conviction with an extended jail term was just announced. Let's get to all the details because you have to see how bad it is.
Breaking news, a Minnesota judge has just sentenced the mastermind behind the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme, Amy Baca. She just got more than 41 years in prison. The prosecution is asking for a 50-year sentence and her defense about 3 years. So that's somewhere in the middle that they got that, but closer to what obviously the prosecution wanted. The scheme involved the theft of nearly $250 million in COVID funding.
Unbelievable.
That money was meant to feed hungry children. State leaders claim they were unaware of the fraud. Here's what Amy Baca told our Alexis McAdams from jail back in January.
I honestly believe Keith Ellison and Governor Walz need to be held accountable. There needs to be an investigation done. If they weren't aware, that's concerning.
So now you have a jailbird starting to sing and starting to question what AG Ellison knew and what Governor Tim Walz knew. And pay attention here because in the very next clip, I'm going to show you how parabolic the fraud was and how there's ultimately no other answer other than they had to have known because the extent of the fraud in the last 5 years is shocking.
So if she's going to prison, is there anybody we know the names of who should as well, is the question now. Senior correspondent Mike Tobin. Anything that maybe Keith Ellison, the AG, is saying these days, Mike?
Well, what we know right now is just from the sentencing. 41 and a half years in prison for the woman at the center of this massive Feeding Our Future scandal. Amy Baca is also on the hook for $243 million scam from taxpayers. She's supposed to somehow pay that back now. That came down just a short time ago in a Minneapolis federal courtroom. Baca was convicted in March 2025 on charges of wire fraud, bribery, money laundering, and conspiracy. Prosecutors say she was the kingpin in this massive fraud that promised to feed poor kids during the pandemic and instead billed taxpayers for phantom meals. Baca sobbed in the courtroom and said, "I understand I failed the public, my family, and everyone." Now, in a pre-sentencing filing, U.S. Attorney Daniel Rosen wrote, "The brazen and staggering nature of her crimes," meaning Baca, "has shaken Minnesota to its core, leaving lasting damage and eroding public trust." Baca has stated that she trusted the people working with the program and was clueless to the fraud. Her defense argued pre-sentencing that many of the actors were entities outside of Ms. Baca's control. Meantime, the Assistant U.S. Attorney for Fraud Enforcement, along with HHS Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. and the U.S. Attorney for Minnesota, are all going to appear in Minneapolis in just a short time. So far, there aren't many details we can release related to the announcement. The Department of Justice just says the announcement is related to the fraud and it will make a significant step in law enforcement. Harris?
Exactly right. And now we're going to transition to the headlines that are coming out of the news conference from HHS and the Department of Justice. Let's get over to it. So the initial announcement from the Department of Justice and HHS is that 15 new schemes were identified this morning in just the last couple of months. Robert Kennedy was saying that this is an exponential speed to identify and is unprecedented in the amount of attention that it's getting from Washington, D.C. But I want you to pay attention to this figure from the Department of Justice about how exponential this growth of fraud was under Governor Tim Walz's watch.
So to run taxpayer-funded programs. An autism program that cost the taxpayer $600,000 just 6 years ago skyrocketed to over $400 million. And to be sure, that number is not driven by supply and demand. It is not driven by healthcare or charity. It is fraud.
So again, a program that just years ago through the state of Minnesota cost taxpayers $600,000 exponentially grew under Tim Walz's watch, under Ilhan Omar's watch, and under AG Keith Ellison's watch, from $600,000 to over $400 million in 5 years. So the extent of the initial investigations are shocking. The amount of growth of the alleged fraud that has taken place in Minnesota is shocking, and this is just the beginning. HHS under Robert Kennedy Jr., as well as the Department of Justice, are all over this. They've quadrupled the amount of prosecutors assigned to just Minnesota. So AG Ellison, Ilhan Omar, and Tim Walz are having a bad day. And the question is, when will they be asked by Donald Trump's Department of Justice, what did you know and when did you know it? So if you like videos like this, be sure to hit the like button. It helps us out a ton in getting this video out to others that would appreciate truthful, honest, and breaking news on what the Democrats are up to. Also, if you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please do so. You could go ahead. We made it very easy. You could hit my face, actually. That's the subscribe button over my left shoulder. And we also have 2 videos that we think you might like. Go ahead and pick your favorite. We'll see you in the next video.